I've ever known. Greatest love, greatest love, yeah.
Greetings, conquerors. Tonight's show is very, very special to us. As a matter of fact, it is part one of a two-part situation. Tonight's episode and next week as well is featuring two of my teachers and two of my favorite people, Brother Craig Bardo and Brother John Drake. There's a lot happening both in the political and in the economical arenas, and we're going to discuss several things. So do me a huge favor. Go ahead and put whatever else you're doing on pause. Go ahead, grab some people and crowd around the device. Tweet some people, text some people, let them know that we're watching TBR Live right now. So go ahead and join us. Ladies and gentlemen, Brother Craig Bardo and Brother John Drake. Here we go, TBR Live. Interesting conversation with interesting people. Let's go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Our very, very special guest tonight is Brother Craig Bardo. Did I say that right?
You did.
Okay. All right. This is a great brother here, and we are so excited to have him. So we're gonna talk about life, career, and maybe some economics. We might even finally tell some jokes. We'll see what happens. Yes, sir. Welcome to the show, Brother Craig.
Thank you very much, Riley. Thank you for having me. Thank you for asking me.
So the first standard question is, who is Craig Bardo?
Depends on who you ask. So if I'm defining myself, I would say that I am a son, a brother, a father, and somebody who really cares a lot about, very passionate about the things that I am passionate about, and those things involve how people get treated, about the way that especially Black folks navigate through the world, and things that are related to that in terms of how people are treated generally by the systems that are supposed to be serving us.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so I don't want to waste any time. I'm gonna put my foot right on the gas at this
Let's do
point.
it.
So on this show, we typically have talked about entrepreneurship, we talked about spirituality, we talked about relationships and all that kind of stuff. One of the areas we hadn't gotten into yet is sort of the political arena, particularly the political economical arena. And I didn't want to get into that without talking to you. So
Okay.
there's a lot happening right now. There's a lot of information coming, some good, some bad. There's just a lot of stuff. People are trying to get adjusted. So I want to kind of talk about some things that maybe we might need to just be paying attention to in this time, because there's a lot of misdirection going on. And so I just want to hear from you. What do you think are a couple of things that, in terms of governmental economics, or however you want to frame that we might need to be paying a little bit closer attention to? What do you think?
Okay, so let me give you some more background about me then, and then that will provide some context for what I'm about to say, and it may make more sense to people. So so I grew up in a small town in Southern Illinois, Carbondale, Illinois, Southern Illinois University. My father's a college professor there, and it was kind of what I would characterize as a liberal home, meaning we woke up in the morning and NPR was playing. We were always concerned about what was happening with Black folk, and but I had a somewhat of a position of privilege relative to other Black folks in our community. You know, our community was largely racially segregated, just like it would be in the South. It was, you know, Black folks lived on the northeast side of town. I lived on the opposite side of town. And what I saw in school, just, it didn't make sense to me, right? I played basketball, I was a very good, you know, I played, you know, I was a all-state high school basketball player. Had a scholarship to play at Indiana University, went to Indiana University, won the national championship there. Ended up graduating from the Citadel after a stint in the Navy. So I've seen a lot of stuff, and then I went into a career with in banking at first, and then financial services. I would say finance, public finance, and investments. And I was dissatisfied, Riley, with just having a career that paid me money, right? I was still interested in the same kinds of questions that I was asking myself as a kid, like, why are these disparities? Why did they exist? What's going on here? And so I went back to school to professionalize my education. I got a master's in communications back in 2015. And, you know, I thought I was done because I just wanted to check that box. But that question about why things are working the way that they are still was nagging at me. So I decided to pursue a PhD in public policy. So the more I dig into that, the more frustrated I get. But here are some things that will, so that context will, provide some background for my concerns. A lot of what I see is, you know, when we talk about politics, especially, Black folk. I mean, it's a contest. Black folks are always looking for, you know, going to vote for Democrats by and large, right? And I'm not suggesting that we vote for Republicans at all, at all. but what do Democrats buy us off on? With? You know, they buy us off with tan suits. Oh, did you see that brother? You know, he pimped in there and he said such and such to so-and-so. But all that time we lost, Black folk lost money, and that home ownership fell precipitously. A lot of bad things happened during that time that we sort of ignored. And we're, some of us are beginning to look back and go, why didn't things get better for us? And then in this most recent election, we were concerned about beating Trump to the point where, James Clyburn came on and said, Black folks don't want any free stuff, talking about Bernie Sanders, and the programs that he was advocating, which were for, free public education, Medicare for all, of course, all of these programs to eliminate debt, to make people's lives better. Well, what we've been living under for the last 40 plus years is a regime of neoliberalism, and what it's a form of capitalism that has redirected. It's a reverse Robin Hood kind of scheme, right? So you take from the poor and give to the rich. So we've been loading up on that. And what's coming down the pike is more public policy that is going to be supportive of that kind of a regime, making us feel bad about what's going on. The people that are not doing well, it's your fault for not doing well, all of that kind of foolishness. But we're going to see more and more misery because a lot of it's already baked in. The focus of my dissertation research, and you may be familiar with this zip code, is 37208.
Absolutely.
North Nashville. And so what happened in North Nashville? public policy happened in North Nashville to create North Nashville. The Eisenhower administration promoted the development of the interstate highway system as a way to connect the nation and to generate more commerce, right? And stop me at any time, so if you have questions or you.
I'm enjoying this. Go ahead. You get
All right, so the conversation when it came to this, but the states control where the track goes, right? And so when it came to Nashville, there was this public conversation sort of that we need to route Interstate 40 through the 372, what is now 37208. So in 1968, that development started, and what happened? Well, the destruction of hundreds of homes, the destruction of 80 plus businesses closed, I believe. 6 or 7 churches were demolished. The roads in North Nashville were what's called dead-ended. So what you did was to isolate North Nashville, and you created a situation where they were out of the flow of commerce, and the residents there suffered as a result of that. Not only that, there was this regime of disinvestment where, instead of investing in schools and things to mitigate the harms done by the interstate development, they pulled money out of Nashville schools in North Nashville, out of schools in North Nashville. They invested heavily in policing to the point where 37208, at least in 2018, I believe it was, suffered the highest incarceration rate in the nation. No other zip code had a higher incarceration rate than North Nashville. So you combine these things over time, right? And then, there's the flood in 2010 here in Nashville, which caused a heavy load of gentrification. So you have the destruction of property in areas of town. That presents an opportunity to people with money and to developers to go in and buy up those properties and to develop them and to extend that extends into downtown. So these adjacent areas, downtown is pretty much what it is. I mean, although you see a lot of cranes there now, people were thinking, well, let me be adjacent to downtown. What's more proximate to downtown than 37208? Mm-hmm. So you begin, yes, you and I think we were, we went down to see Lorenzo. We went to have a meeting. You were there.
Yes, sir.
Lorenzo, Washington, he showed us plans from 20 years ago, mm-hmm. where these meetings were held, zoning meetings and those kinds of things for the development of 37208, but without any Black folks involved in it. He had plans and he saw all this stuff. It was presented to him. And he showed us this stuff. He said, no, all this stuff is going to be gentrified very soon, very quickly. So, Joe, you interviewed Joe Hines, my friend Joe Hines, our friend Joe Hines. He's from that area, and his home is there. His childhood home is there, and so all of where the joke is that now you see white women walking their dogs mm-hmm. in those neighborhoods
at night.
At night, mm-hmm. right? And it's true. I mean, it's absolutely. I've been over there. I was like, what is that? Mm-hmm. So, and now your mayor, who is a developer, has proposed to place an interstate cap over the I-40 in North Nashville as a way to create what's called a green space. A green space is another way of promoting gentrification. So if you put a park over someplace, then it makes the area attractive to people who then want to move there because they have access to that space. It's near downtown. And then all of a sudden, the residents of that particular area who have an income of 40% of the average median income for Nashville, they can't afford Nashville. They can't afford Nashville for many reasons. They can't afford Nashville because housing prices have been driven up. They can't afford Nashville now because utility prices have been going up. Transportation systems in Nashville are non-existent and are very challenging if you're in that area. And then there's housing prices. So with all of this development, with all of this proposals by the mayor and developers and all of these people, you have income deficits relative to the ability to own and purchase a home or to rent that are just untenable. And so now we have people who are being evicted. We have people who are homeless that we are serving, and organizations that I'm involved with are coming alongside to do our best. But that's not a solution. It's not a solution. So what's coming to the rest of us who don't live in 37208 is 37208. That's what's coming.
Man, so there's a lot in there that I want to get into. First question is this: as a body, I'm talking specifically Black folk, and even low income white communities, Hispanics or whatever. Are we asking the right questions in this time? And if we're not, what are the right questions at this time?
Right. So a lot of the response, and I know John Drake is going to be joining us, who's a proponent of Black capitalism, and a lot of the response has been from people who say, look, the government has never done anything for us. We're going to have to do this for ourselves. We're going to have to pull ourselves together collectively and build our own institutions. I agree with that. I mean, I don't disagree with that. Let me put it that way. I think we do need to pull our own institutions together, but we need to do it with a framework. We need to do it with some understanding about what it is that we're trying to accomplish. Okay. So are we trying to be mini capitalists? Are we trying to be the exploiters, like the folks who have exploited the Black folks in 37208 or the Native Americans all over the country? Are we trying to do that, or are we trying to work cooperatively to produce something different? The example that I'll give you is Cooperation Jackson down in Jackson, Mississippi. They have, among other things, pulled together some resources in the community to create what's called a community land trust. What a community land trust is a way to pool the resources of a community to purchase land, to develop land that you can build on. So you can build on houses, and people can buy into these houses or multifamily residences, apartment dwellings, those kinds of things, but at very, very much lower price points, right? The challenge is that you're not going to sell it for anything more. So you're not building equity, but you have an ability you're not building a lot of equity. Let me put it that way. You're not going to build a lot of equity in these because you can't. Part of the bargain is that your low cost of living is going to be passed on the person who succeeds you if you decide to leave. You can stay for as long as you want, provided you follow the rules, but you'll be able to stay there and not have your housing costs be such a high rate or a high expense. Another thing that they do down in Cooperation Jackson is they have community food, community gardens, and those kinds of things. So they work cooperatively with each other to feed each other, right? And they also have businesses that they run in common. So those are the kinds of things. So when we're asking questions, what questions should we be asking? when we're confronted with these things, my question is, what's the policy behind this? Where's the money going to come from? Because if you look at Black people, if you're looking to Black people for collective support with money, I'll give you an example. So the city, the Boston, the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston conducted a study that was published in 2015, and it wanted to understand the average net worth of a white person in Boston versus a Black person in Boston. So the average net worth of a white person in Boston was $235,000 in 2015. Just give me a guess about what the average net worth of a Black family in Boston was.
28,000.
$85.
Really?
No, I'm sorry. I'm way high. $8.
Wow.
$8.
I didn't know that.
So you replicate that here and elsewhere to one degree or another. What you're looking at is, and we don't have the ability to pool our resources together because we don't have, as the comedian, you want to joke, Robin Harris, the late great comedian, he said, man, he said, man, you 30 cents from a quarter. That's the condition of Black people. And that 30 cents don't even account for 30 cents from short of a quarter doesn't even account for the debt that we're in, right? That kind of, kind of weighs and it shapes everything, right? So it creates mental health challenges. All this thing is a big mental health challenge. So you're looking at a confluence of things that has run us into the ground, and we're looking to pull ourselves up but we ain't got no boots. What are you talking about, bootstraps? So it's not about the hustle. It's not about financial literacy. It's not about any of those things. And so, and I also don't mean to disparage those who have taken the tack that says, look, I'm looking out here at jobs. This don't make any doggone sense at all, right? It doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to create my own gig. I'm going to do my own hustle. Mm-hmm. We know Richard, who's doing freight. That's completely commendable. I want to find ways to support Richard, some further ways to support Richard. Got Joe, and he's doing inspections in addition to his day job, right? Mm-hmm. And his wife Rhonda is doing, she's selling real estate. I have no problem with people that are trying to do that because that makes sense in this kind of an economy. You do what you can. Right. But is it a collective way for us to gain our liberation? I don't think so. The only thing that is strong enough or powerful enough to that has enough leverage to lift us out of these holes that we find ourselves in, not by our own design, is the same tools that put us in there in the first place, and that's public policy. We need public policy. And so when we're talking about politics, when we're talking about solutions, we also need to incorporate some public policy. I'll give you an example. Basic income is something that was talked about in the last election cycle with Andrew Yang. There's an organization from some folks from North Nashville put this thing together. They were part of Gideon's Army, the original folks. Mm-hmm. And they're doing a pilot project where they are providing $1,000 a month to, I forget the number of families, but they raised this money, mostly white people from outside the community. It had to be, because we got so. But what they're doing is that they've raised, I think so far they've raised a little more than 500,000. I mean, their goal is to get to 1 million, and they'll be able to service 10 families, I think it is, or something like that, for a year as a demonstration project. That demonstration project is in support of advocacy for public policy that says, hey, look, if we do this on a targeted basis, this is going to improve not only improve the lives of the people in these communities, which should be sufficient, but it will also help the entire community because it will reduce some of the kinds of negative things that happen. And from a how should I say, from a personal development standpoint, this money is given to them no strings attached. They can make their own best decisions. They're adults, right? So those are the kinds of things that I think that we need to be asking, well, what's the public policy that is going to support whatever it is that we advocate? Where's the public money? Because aren't we paying taxes? Aren't we citizens of this city? So some of these resources can come our way. We just need to know to ask for them and to insist upon them, especially when people come to us with asking for our vote. That requires education. What kinds of public policies, Craig? What are the things that we ought to be supporting or looking at? So we have to educate ourselves on the kinds of resources that would be beneficial to us. I think it would be beneficial to families with small children to have childcare paid for, wouldn't it? I think that would do a whole lot for them.
No doubt.
It would be beneficial for people to have health care coverage, those kinds of things. So that's the kind of questions. Those are the kinds of questions that I would be asking.
So is your thinking to find out what public policy is already in place, or is your position to sort of create the public policy to get done what needs to be done, or is it a sort of a mashing of them both, or what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so right. So that's a good question, right? So you have to know where you're starting, right? And so what I do is to examine what the current state of public policy are here in Nashville, and also those that affect us from the state as well as nationally, and to look at that in the context of what people need here, right? And so it's a combination of those things. So I'm gonna very shortly be doing something to that effect on my own, like producing a journal. I'm still working out the format and that kind of thing that kind of speaks to public policy here in Nashville. Like a public policy newsletter that says, that identifies what's going on with our people, that identifies the public policies that are in place that are supposed to address it but don't, and then how we might organize things differently so that whenever we're having these political conversations, or even these conversations about what we might do together collectively, we'll have a framework that says, oh, okay, yeah, we need to think it through this way to and it's just a framework, right? So I'm not asking everybody to agree with what I say.
Okay.
It's more important for people who are affected to be in agreement. Like, no, this is what I need, and which is the Moving Nashville Forward project. It's like, give me some money. That's perfectly legitimate. Like you've taken money from them, give them their money back. Essentially, you've robbed them of opportunity. You've taken what might be their productive energy, used for their own purposes, and stolen it, and made them feel bad about it. Give them the money back.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm totally with you on that. So let me ask you a really stupid question. And you'll know why I call it stupid after I ask the question. Black folk, how close are we in agreement to what it is we want to accomplish?
Oh,
Do we know?
We have no agreement. So here's there's two things that go on. Yeah, that's a tricky question, right? It's not a stupid question. That's a tricky one. It's a good one. So one of the things that I'm passionate about is propaganda, right? And so propaganda is is very powerful. John Drake.
Good evening to you, sir. How you doing, man? Oh, he's out of there. Still,
He's not connected yet.
yeah.
So propaganda is a very. Do you want me to wait for John?
Hold on, keep talking. We'll include him once he gets rolling.
All right, that's cool. So one of my the area of my emphasis in communications was propaganda, and the reason is because because I worked in the field of propaganda. I was a marketer.
Okay.
It's propaganda, and most people believe that propaganda affects other people. It's very.
Good evening.
Brother John, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm driving, so you can't see me, but I can hear y'all.
Okay. We'll Craig is in the middle of a good point, so let me let him finish his point, and we'll include you in the conversation shortly.
Okay.
So John was talking about propaganda and my interest in it, and Riley was asking whether we are, what's the state of the Black community? Did he say something?
I don't think so.
About the state of the Black community's agreement about what needs to be done collectively or individually or whatever. And I was saying that no, we're not in agreement, and that a big part of that is the way that we, it has been said that Americans are the most propagandized people on the face, and there are very good arguments for that. I won't list them all, but Malcolm is famous for saying that media is the most powerful entity on earth because it can make you, think one thing when another is actually true, and that's the nature of what we're challenged with. So we end up with a lot of noise, and it's coming at us constantly. If you turn, I can't turn on the television because it drives me crazy. I for years I stopped watching television. I turn it on now. It's just overwhelmed by the amount of commercials that just come at you and how stupid they are.
Absolutely.
But they work. The psychology that goes into this is crazy. So I'll give you the example of what I was ranting about this weekend. The NFL had its military promotion thing going, and I looked at it, I was like, why are they in camouflage? Why are they all wearing camouflage? And it's the Pentagon's promotion of military budgets, really, for weapons manufacturers, for arms dealers, for what we call the Pentagon, for the defense budget. But what they do is they characterize it as being in support of the quote unquote troops. Now, we may not approve of their missions. We probably don't approve of many of their missions, but when you talk about troops, you're talking about people, right? And we know we have family members who've been in the military. I was in the military.
Yeah.
So we don't want to think of these people in a negative light. So the Pentagon understands this. So they characterize, they promote this show that they put on as being in support of the quote unquote troops. It's in support of the banks, the finance war. It's in support of the capitalist class that is imperialist, that is trying to take over resources all over the world. That was what that was about. So they use the troops and the fact that we like people. We don't want to characterize people poorly. And they also use this thing called the flag, which for a lot of, I'll say it, white people, is like a religion.
Yes.
Right? So you wave that flag, do you see that tear coming down that eye, staining that camouflage shirt they got on? That pulls at their heartstrings. So you put in there, it's the equivalent of what they used to do with posing half-naked girls next to cars. What's that got to do with the car? But it makes you think, I'm gonna get some if I get this car. That's all it is. And so, I'm just being real with you. Right? That's what happened.
Yes, sir.
So that's the connection.
Mhm.
So they've done that thing in a much more layered and sophisticated way with military flyovers and flag waving and camouflage on the field to promote the wars of empire. That's a lot of what we confront when we are looking at trying to have unity. And the folks that are doing this type of work are very sophisticated and they study a lot.
Mhm.
There's a program that I was going to go into that called media psychology. And I looked at the curriculum, I said, I'm going to be a mad scientist. I'm going to be this guy here doing manipulating people's minds. That's what happens. So that's why I think that there's some challenges to our unity.
Okay. Gotcha. Let's see if we can get John in on this. John, you with us? You may need to unmute your device. I know he's going to want to say something about this.
Yeah, he's still on mute. Hey, John, are you going to edit this or play it?
I'm going to do a little bit, but I want it exactly the way it is.
Yeah. I mean, it out all this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So while he's sort of getting things together, so what's the probability that we fix this mess?
Yeah.
How do we? I mean,
Yeah,
because every generation that I can think of,
right.
My uncle, who's passed away, he's been gone a couple of years, but when we were kids, he was talking about what's happening right now on Jefferson Street. He told us every time we saw him, if we don't do something, get together and buy some of this stuff, we ain't gonna have it no more, and we won't be able to buy it because it'll be too expensive. In the generation before that, said the same thing. So can we fix this? Can we clean up this mess?
We can. We can. The challenge goes back to your former question. Are we united about how we do it? Can we be united in the ways that we do it? How do we fix this?
Mm-hmm.
How do we fix a problem that was created by public policy? What I mean by public policy is money, right? So if you've invested money into a problem, into creating a problem, and you don't have the resources to address that problem on your own, where is the money going to come from to address the problem? So, one of the solutions that I talked to you about in terms of housing was the community land trust, right? So, but you have to be able to acquire the land in the first instance, or to have it, in the case of what Nashville has done in some instances, is to give over public lands to a community land trust that is then charged with developing that land. In a certain framework. So you have to think through the implications, short-term and long-term, and you have to be able to have resources. And so resources is something that we don't, by and large, have. As I shared.
Can anybody hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay. I don't know what was going wrong a minute ago. Sorry for being late. One of the pitfalls of capitalism is sometimes it's hard to find good help, and someone that hired to do a job didn't do it. So I had to do 3 jobs today. So instead of the 2 I was expecting to do. But good to see you, Craig. I can't see me because I'm driving, but I'm here. It's really me. And I think that. So and Craig, was that Malcolm X that you were quoting earlier?
Was
about the propaganda? Was that Malcolm? I missed a little bit of that.
It was Malcolm.
Okay, all right. Well, one of the things I think a lot of times people focus on disagreement and when there is a lot of agreement. For example, if you look historically, right out of slavery, you had Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. And then you had Du Bois versus Marcus Garvey. And then you had Malcolm X versus Martin Luther King and Byron Russell. And the one thing that all of those brothers had in common is they had the same ultimate goal. So people can talk about the differences, but there's the same ultimate goal. And if you go all the way back to Booker T. Washington, you know, a lot of people were critical of him. It was like, oh, he's just playing to the white people and this, that, and the other. But when you consider that some of a good bit of the money that he was able to acquire, he used it to fund civil rights litigation back in the 1800s. And, you know, one thing multiple black attorneys will tell you is, we don't like to see the NAACP come around. Not that we have anything against the NAACP, but they will bring you cases and not bring you any money. And so it's like, oh, here's a good case, and this person was done something wrong, and you know, and you spend all this time on the case, and it's good to do the reduced value work and not reduced value, but reduced cost work and everything, and you feel good about it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't keep the bills paid. And so having somebody with deep pockets willing to fund things, whether you're talking about litigation or lobbying or funding people getting into business or whatever it is a requirement for, in my opinion, for any community to move forward. And so, you know, there's a question of what is effective, what takes us forward. I agree with everything Craig was saying about the propaganda on the military. In fact, one of the reasons, I think when I met you, Craig, I think you were more Republican and I was more Democrat. I could be wrong. I don't know.
You were both kind of libertarian on one side or the other.
Well, I started shifting. I used to be very, very liberal. And what caused me to shift was, you know, after 9/11 and I saw civil liberties being taken away, I was expecting the Democratic Party to stand up and say, you know, no, George, but you can't do this. And they didn't. And by and large, there was Dennis Kucinich. I'll give him credit for it. And then there was Ron Paul that was standing up from the Republican side. And during that 2008 election, I vacillated between Dennis Kucinich and Ron Paul. And then I think it was the issue of the Second Amendment that swayed me more than Ron Paul, because I decided, you know, if I can't trust the government, you know, on terrorism and everything, then why would I trust them to disarm everybody? But yeah, the whole thing about, and I looked at Obama, and when Obama was just a little too militaristic for me. And then when I saw what happened in Libya, which was a travesty, in my opinion, which led to
bombing everybody, John.
Okay.
He was bombing. He ran out of bombs.
See, Craig, you can get away with that. Whenever I
can ask you guys a question. And this is for both of you. So, John, you brought up something that I think is very valuable, that I don't want to leave until we solve that. You talked about the verses, the one black leader versus the other, because they want to get to the same place, but the road that they would like to do to get there is different. And so my question is, why does it have to be one side or the other? Because it seems to me, and this is just based on limited research, whenever there was two sides, the Army essentially needs both of them to make the thing work. So why does it have to be, I gotta go with Malcolm, or I gotta go with Martin, or I gotta go with one guy or the other, when essentially everything that they're talking about, if we just take both of those ideas, we can get where we want to go. So why is it necessary to just pick one side or the other?
That's a very good question. I don't think it has to be. I think there's several things that get in the way. I think ego gets in the way, definitely. I think that also who we ally ourselves with gets in the way. You know, if you feel the need to, you know, if you're like, okay, there are some Black people on the right that I simply cannot get with because I feel like they go too far in trying to appease, like Candace Owens. I don't disagree with everything that she says, but you know, when George Floyd was killed and she came out with what I thought was simply an attention getter video about, oh, I don't support George Floyd and he's such a horrible person and everything. Well, you know, George Floyd did some bad things, but what happened to him was horrible. And when I saw Rush Limbaugh, well, I didn't see him, I could hear Rush Limbaugh on the Breakfast Club. When they asked about George Floyd, he didn't try to play a little shuffle game. He's like, oh yeah, it's terrible, da, da, da. So she went further than Rush Limbaugh, you know, or Larry Elder saying that, you know, oh, there should have been reparations for the slave owners. That's ridiculous. So if you're trying to ally yourself, but then you have the same thing going the other direction. You know, when Ice Cube was saying before the last election, look, we've got to talk to both sides to make sure we get something for Black people. And he tried to talk to Biden, and he talked to Trump. The Biden administration blew him off, said, okay, we'll talk to you after the election. I haven't heard anything about them actually talking to them since the election. Trump administration said, okay, we'll put an offer on the table. Look at what you're doing. We'll do the platinum plan. It wasn't perfect, but they talked to him. Ice Cube got all this flack. You know, there are people saying, oh, you didn't put anything in there. There's nothing in there for the transgenders and for the women. I'm like, it's for Black people in general. You know, why do we have to segment ourselves further? You know, and the one of the ladies from Black Lives Matter was like, well, you talked to Trump and he called us terrorists. Well, and why are you talking to Trump? Well, because he's the president of the United States and he has influence with Republicans to try to get some money for Black people. Not because Trump likes Black people. Trump likes votes, you know, and it's like when I was when I had was about to graduate from high school, I had even though I was at a mostly white academy, a lot of racist kids there and stuff. I had the highest ACT score, so Southern Adventist University was trying to recruit me, as well as Oakwood University, which is the Black Adventist University in Huntsville. When I went to Southern, we were met by these students dressed in Confederate uniforms and antebellum dresses, handing out Confederate uniforms. And I'm like, I've had enough of the Confederate flag, you know? So I told my mom, I was like, I'm not interested in Southern, even though they have offered all this money. My mom, she was smart, may she rest in peace. She was like, okay, but find out how much Southern is offering, and we're gonna make Oakwood match. And so that's what we did. And you can, it's not going to kill Black people to, you know, to get off the Democratic plantation long enough to ask the Democrats to do what a Republican is willing to do. Not, and I don't even think, you know, the platinum plan, like I said, it wasn't perfect. But I haven't heard, and Craig, you can correct me if I'm wrong, in this latest multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure bill, did they do anything to address Black issues in there at all? Because I haven't heard that.
You mean other than kente cloth and BLM t-shirts?
Okay.
Right? Yeah. So I agree with John. There's in Democrat politics, they've mastered this identity reductionism. You know, meaning, you know, yes, you know, Black trans women suffer greatly, are subject to violence and all of that. And I stand with them in solidarity with them. But in terms of politics, there's no segregating out Black trans women or looking at flawed formulation like intersectionality, the multiple oppressions. I mean, how many times you are oppressed versus another person who's oppressed, I think is not useful. When you're looking at, so rather than looking at those things, as John says, what are we doing for Black folks? Because that pretty much covers everybody that's Black, right? Whether you're trans, whether you're, gay or straight or married or single, child or an adult, that covers you if you're Black. And that's the oppressed class. So, when you're looking at those distinctions, it's really not helpful. And those are the kinds of frameworks that Democrats use to gain support in some instances, but they're not offering you anything. They're really not offering anything other than they just want your vote. and in terms of I like where John was going in terms of the distinctions between Malcolm and Martin and Garvey and Du Bois and Booker T and Elijah Muhammad and so many Amos Wilson, so many of our great thinkers who may have departed in one way or another. They were all looking toward the same goal and objective, and a lot of times, as was in the case of Malcolm and Martin, they converged. Their ideas actually came closer together. They didn't grow apart. They came closer together. We lost them both too early, but they were converging in their idea because they were confronting the same phenomenon, right? If you confront the same stuff enough, you're gonna end up. You're like, okay, we got this. Do you see that? Yeah, I see that too. You know what I'm saying. So you're gonna end up in the same place if you're not, as John suggests, allowing ego to drive your conversation. You're gonna end up in a lot of the same places.
Okay, I asked that question because I see it. I see it a lot when we're not in agreement to the process. There tends to be this automatic shift of I gotta take one side or the other.
Yeah.
Or I have to roll with this leader versus that one if we're trying to get to the same place. I don't understand why we have to pick a side in order to get there.
So like if you're looking at the context, so we're all on a thread, right? So we all are. So John and I like to argue. We just like to argue.
That's why I wanted y'all on the show at the same time.
Because I might take John's position and argue his position to see if I can do it better. Just for the fun of it. John and I like to discuss. We've always done that. We would sit at church and argue. Everybody looking at it like, what are y'all doing? Literally, we sit up and argue at church. So, it's just something that we do. I don't know. So I think there's, as John suggests, I think there's a lot more agreement there. Even on a subject like capitalism, I think once you break down the definitions, I think that you'll find that we agree a lot more. But in the real world, I'll give you an example of something that I was just looking at. It was Fidel Castro's role in African independence movements, and particularly in the Portuguese colonies of Guinea-Bissau and Angola. And so there were 3 separate groups in Angola that, they said, look, the emperor has no clothes. We're coming for the capital city. Portugal, you got to go. Portugal was like, yeah, we know, we got to go. So in the north, there was a group. In the south, Jonas Savimbi, somebody else, so you had these competing groups and they all came together. They didn't trust each other. And so then they brought their armies. They were supposed to be there to negotiate. And then it just broke out into a war because then it was like, who's going to lead us? What's the ideology? it got to the place where Zavimbi was getting support from apartheid South Africa. That's crazy, right? So then you have to check to understand, okay, so what are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to do?
Yeah.
You know, so you have some very real disagreements, but when power, when that kind of conversation devolves into anything goes, as long as I get power, then I have a problem with that. As long as we're on the same side, like you're suggesting, like we're trying to get to, we have the same goals and objectives. I just need to know that we actually, in fact, do have the same goals and objectives. Then I can walk with you.
Okay, I see that. You're speaking to your intent or that we are in real alignment, not just in words.
Correct.
Okay.
You know, there are people that will take advantage. You know, that just pure. You know, in England, when there was a great migration from the Caribbean to England from, of Black folks in what they call the Windrush generation, there were some leaders there, and then there were some scammers there who would co-opt the language. And I'll give you an example, contemporary example here. How did Black Lives Matter start? Black Lives Matter helicoptered in from outside of St. Louis. There were already protests going on. There were leaders there that were leading the protests. And then these young women, Alicia Garza and her contemporaries, put on some Black Lives, and they created a slogan. They didn't have a program. They didn't have anything that was going on the ground. They just literally stepped in front of other people who had been there struggling and put on a t-shirt and called it Black Lives Matter. And their politics reflected that. So they and now you have, what's her name? Tamika Mallory, who's now, we would refer to her as a Cadillac activist, right? Because she was supposed to be this activist. She appears in a Cadillac commercial now. Like, what? What? Who are you representing? So you have black male death out there, and Tamika Mallory steps in, and she gets a Cadillac commercial and a bunch of money. Alicia Garza's got buying up homes all over the place. So are we in alignment with that? Are they leaders?
I got you.
So
I got
so
you.
that's that is Sean King is another one who's well publicized dude, probably not black, passes himself as that. All of the evidence is that his mama says he ain't black. She said, "Who is black in our family?" He'll pass on some good stuff every once in a while, but then you look at him, and he somebody published, he bought some fabulous residence in New Jersey. I'm not against people having good stuff. You can have good stuff, but who are you working for?
Right.
And is that what you're really trying to accomplish? So, so is our suffering supposed to generate wealth for you? Is that what this is about? So, when I talk about alignment, that's what I'm talking about. Like, if you have an alignment of interest, then yeah, we can walk together. But if you're in it for some reason other than what we all are saying that we're here for, then I got a question.
Okay. And